And I thought this morning as I saw some of you and looked around, how wonderful this is, because there's nothing like ministry. And what I want to share with you today will help you with God's divine appointment for you. You know, none of us are an accident. We're all a divine appointment. So look at someone and say, honey, you look like a divine appointment. Now, this is what I want to share with you. God has a vision for every one of us. God has a destiny for every one of us. And when I look at the life of Joseph and I look at my own life, I see how it is a process. Everybody say process. And I remember living in Texas when I was 6 years old and lying on the ground and looking up at an airplane and thinking, someday I'll be on one. Never actually live on them. But, you know, you don't know what God is doing. And then I lived in Sewickley, Pennsylvania. I was born again in Jamonville, but it was in Sewickley in 7th grade. I took Latin, and I loved it. Ended up taking 5 years of it. Then I took Spanish, I took French, I took Greek, and I felt I was called to be a foreign ambassador. Now, called, that was just my attitude. And so I prepared, it was part of the process. And when you read Psalm 139, you will see that everyone here, God has a divine appointment. And that he even keeps a book on you, how he makes you. So if you're skinny, he put in the book skinny. If you're fat, he said fat, fat, fat. No, he didn't say that. But all of us are divinely destined and God has a plan. Now what I have found, I'm going to give you 4 points. So it'll be easy in your mind some way. So I want to look at Joseph. You know, Joseph, very young, the youngest, well, next to Benjamin, and he had 2 dreams. And he was a young man when he had them, and the sun, moon, and stars bowed down to him, and then the sheaves of wheat bowed down to him. And he told his dreams to his brothers. Now, you know, God puts things in us, puts special dreams, but our family doesn't always understand. You know what I'm saying? You know, you may say, well, I have a dream someday of being a medical doctor, or I have a dream of going to... And so this is the number one key thing I want you to get. You have to hold on to your dreams. That's number one. You can't let them go. So put your hand on your heart. Say, I will never forget the dreams God gives me, I have to hold on to. And so I look at Joseph. He had these 2 dreams, and it looks like he is in authority. And then I began to see something else that's very, very important. And the second part of this, the 4 parts, is that you have to practice. Everybody say practice. So there's a young man in our church, and I dearly love him, but he came to me about 6 years ago, and he said, I had a dream that I had a meeting as big as Reinhard Bonnke. And he said, that's going to happen. I said, well, he said, what would you suggest? I said that you go across the street and win your neighbors. Because dreams have process. Everybody say, dreams have process. So I see what Joseph began to do. He took over his father's estate. And he had an ability to organize. And so you start that, and when I began to see the lost people, my husband and I started a church, and I thought, we don't have any lost coming. And I said to God, where are the lost? He said, if you want the lost, you have to go get them. And so I learned you had to do that. But all of that was part of the process. Everybody say process. Well, how do you get the lost? So I began to have Bible studies with women, and over a cup of coffee, a cookie, and a Bible, they'd get saved. And then I started at night to have some dinners with their husbands, and their husbands over, dinner and Bible would get born again. And so these people said to me, have you ever thought of going on the radio? Now this is part of the process. Everybody say process. And now you will say, well, you hadn't been to Bible school. You're right. I was a school teacher. I did take Greek, but, I'm not very good with it. Sarah's really good with Greek and Hebrew. I'm not. And so, I was in a process because these people would come and get saved. They began to get Spirit-filled. They began to come up to our church. And then they said to me, we could get more people if you would go on the radio. Radio? Well, how could I afford it? So I went to my husband, and my husband said, I'm fine if you go on the radio, but it's your baby, you feed it. He said, why can't those Bible studies pay for it? Well, I said, it's $60 a month. He said, honey, you got to have faith. So I went to the Bible studies, and they put me on. And so I had 5 minutes every weekday, and that was very wonderful. But we began to have a lot of response. Now, what's going on? I'm practicing. Everybody say practicing. And I taught Sunday school in our church. I taught these Bible studies, and I was practicing. Now, let me tell you, when you're practicing, not everybody is encouraging. And I remember, and my husband was very encouraging. He was wonderful about it. He just wouldn't pay for it. But I remember an evangelist that we liked so well that was from Wales came to our church, and he said, he said, you don't have the women's missionary thing. You don't roll bandages and make quilts. All you do are their silly little home Bible studies. And so I want to tell you, when you're in the practice, not everybody is going to be encouraging. Are you hearing me? And so especially your relatives. So I lived in Sewickley, Pennsylvania, and I had a wonderful aunt. And so when my husband and I started a church, she was very embarrassed. She wouldn't even tell her friends that I was in the ministry. They'd say, well, Marilyn, what are you doing? Oh, they just do a little church thing, that's all. And she said to me, you could have made something with your life, but you've just thrown it away. No, I just caught it, And so your relatives don't always understand, but you don't give up. Right? Look at someone and say, honey, you don't know how to give up. Okay, so here he is. He's taking care of the estate, and he's a very good organizer, and he's doing very, very well. But his brothers became very jealous. As I said, many times our relatives do not understand. And so the father really recognized him and recognized he had ability, and he gave him a many-colored coat, which showed that he has authority. So, he's next to the youngest, and they didn't want him having authority over them. And they knew about those dreams. So one day, they were out working in the fields, and the father said to Joseph, I want you to go and tell the brothers, that what they are supposed to do. And he gave Joseph this many-colored coat to show that he was in authority. Now watch. When he started out there toward them, they said, here comes the dreamer. This is family. Everybody say family. Because many times family do not understand why you would set aside a career or set aside money and just really devote yourself to Jesus. And so they said, and they were so jealous of him and so unspiritual that they threw him in a pit. And they sold him as a slave to Egypt. Now this is what I have found. God uses all kinds of circumstances to train you and practice you for what he has for you. I know this about God. He's very economical. He doesn't waste anything. Nothing. And so, here he is. He's been practicing on his father's estate, and he gets sold by his brothers. And by the way, they grabbed the coat, and they put blood on it and lied to the father and said an animal had killed him. And so he gets to Egypt. Now, watch yourself, because while you're practicing, you could get bitter at some of the comments. And you could get unhappy with some of the things people say, right? And so he could have said, dear God, where are you? Here I am up here in Egypt. I'm a slave. My father probably thinks I'm dead. And, forget it. Hang it up. But he didn't. He practiced. Everybody say practice. And so in this time, I had a Sunday morning program, because Oral Roberts had one and one of our pastors did. This could be a good thing for our church. It could help it grow. We could win more lost. So I went to Channel 9 Secular Studio to see if they would put me on. And so they had me meet with their board, and there were 9 men. And these 9 men looked at me and they said, "You're not television material. You would never make it. You better stay with the radio." Now, folks, I've only been on television 45 years. And none of those men are on television. Hey, God thinks you can do anything. Hold on to your dreams. Everybody say, hold on. Don't let go. So one man stood up and he said, "I think we ought to try her. I think she'll pay her bill." And so I did for 8 years. But in this timing, the radio was beginning to grow. And we syndicated the radio. And the radio was really a blessing to me. And I loved radio, and I loved the people that it reaches and the response of it. And, I didn't have a lot of money or a lot of anything. And if you knew where I did my radio tapes, I did them in a closet in the basement of our house. And, one time a cricket was down there, and right in the middle of the tape, the cricket went chirp, and I had to start over. And then it chirped again. And so finally I just gave up and thought, put a chirp on. And a woman, I think from back east, said to me, "I'm in a mental hospital. I hadn't heard a cricket for many years." And the chirp really encouraged me. So these are things in the process. Everybody say process. So what did Joseph do? He practiced. Now remember, every new situation you get into that you practice in is developing you, because God doesn't waste anything. He doesn't waste anything. And so he's practicing on that estate, and he's very good. He could really motivate people. He really knew how to organize people. And so Potiphar is quite impressed with him, but so is Potiphar's wife. And she tries to seduce him. And later I'll tell you about his words, because your words in this time are very